Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our webinar. Today we'll be talking about Introduction to Adverse Event Review. My name is Terry Bowler, and I will be your host. This webinar will take approximately 60 minutes, with the last 30 minutes being a time of question and answer. This webinar is designed to be interactive. To better understand the content, we encourage you to ask questions by clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of the screen. You will see the questions posted on the right side, and these comments or questions will be answered during the Q&A session. And all your participants are on a listen-only mode. This webinar is hosted by Emanate Life Sciences. Emanate's mission is to help their clients bring products to market that improve people's lives. As a data management functional service provider, Emanate provides both full service and contract consultants. Emanate understands the technical challenges of imaging and CEC adjudication between sites, core labs, and sponsors. Emanate can assist your study team implement solutions with optimized processes that are both PHI and 21 CFR compliant. To request additional information, visit Emanate's website at www.emanatelifesciences.com. Our other sponsor is Criterion Edge. Criterion Edge is a regulatory writing company that provides outsourced writing services to the pharmaceutical and medical device industries. The company's expertise in regulatory writing best practices, honed over decades, produces superior deliverables and provides budget, resource, and timeline flexibility for regulatory managers. Criterion Edge empowers companies to deliver superior healthcare solutions. To learn more about how Criterion Edge can help you achieve your regulatory goals, see criterionedge.com or contact the company at info@criterionedge.com. Now I'd like to introduce our two presenters. Lori Mitchell is founder and president of Criterion Edge. She has over 25 years experience in medical writing, pharmacovigilance management, and regulatory reporting. Lori brings extensive experience creating and training data safety monitoring boards and clinical event committees, as well as working with global cross-functional teams. Having worked for 3 of the 4 major medical device sponsors, she maintains expertise in many therapeutic areas. She holds a BS in nursing and an MS as a CD clinical nurse specialist from UCLA. Our second speaker is Kyoko Hattori. Kyoko brings a wealth of expertise to the area of clinical safety. With more than 30 years of clinical research experience, she's done it all, from clinical research nursing in academic and outpatient settings. She's also worked at 2 major medical device manufacturers, and most recently at an international CRO. Kyoko has managed safety from clinical trials to post-marketing in the US, EMEA, and Asia-Pac geographies. Her most recent role was Director of Safety and Pharmacovigilance. Kyoko is fluent in Japanese and has managed entire Japanese programs, including PMDA reporting. We're excited to have both extremely experienced professionals speaking today. And before I turn this over to our presenters, I'd like to remind you to use the chat icon at the bottom of the screen for the Q&A portion following the presentation. So Lori, if you'd like to begin.
Thank you, Terry. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending the webinar today as we present this introduction to adverse event review. Today's presentation will describe the history and evolution of the concept of safety reviews, introduce FDA guidelines relevant to safety monitoring, describe the components of AE reviews as they pertain to screening for reportability, describe how individual AE reviews impact the big picture beyond product approval, and finally, describe the different adjunct safety roles and their responsibilities in ensuring patient safety. Presented here is a sampling of early key regulatory milestones that helped shape the concept of safety monitoring in the United States. In 1938, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act was passed, requiring manufacturers to prove the safety of their marketed products. And in 1962, the Kefauver-Harris Amendment was added, requiring manufacturers to demonstrate the efficacy of their marketed products. This amendment was established in direct response to the thalidomide tragedy that took place in Europe in the late 1950s. If you recall, thalidomide was a sedative widely given off-label to pregnant women in Europe and other countries to control morning sickness. It was not approved for use in the US. And although there were no data to back up the claim, it was marketed as completely safe, even during pregnancy. However, the prevalence of severe birth defects drastically increased in women taking the drug. Finally, by 1962, thalidomide was banned around the world for this use. In 1967, the NIH conceptualized a formal committee to be responsible for reviewing data to monitor safety, effectiveness, and trial conduct. Following that, in 1976, Congress passed the Medical Device Amendments, or MDA, establishing regulations intended to ensure the safety and effectiveness of medical devices. Finally on our list, in 1979, the NIH issued a guidance titled NIH Guide, Volume 8, Number 8, that stated every clinical trial should have a provision for data and safety monitoring. What are some key FDA regulations that pertain to safety monitoring? First, I think it's a truism that regulations constantly evolve and can be largely influenced by the current political and regulatory landscape. This only underscores the importance of keeping up with regulatory changes, new proposals, and draft documents posted by regulatory authorities for public feedback and comment. There are specific regulations that govern the safety monitoring activities of the pharma, medical device, and biologics manufacturers. These regulations are then further described as pertaining to pre- or post-market, and they all differ by country. Listed here is a small sample of relevant references in the CFR that are a good place to start. Then there are FDA guidances, not regulations. Some of the examples listed here pertain to different situations and are directed to specific parties. For example, guidances aimed at industry and investigators include safety reporting requirements for INDs and bioavailable and bioequivalent studies. A guidance that pertains to industry and FDA staff is a medical device reporting for manufacturers guidance. The E2E pharmacovigilance planning guidance is relevant to industry. And finally, all clinical trial sponsors should be familiar with the guidance on the establishment and operation of clinical trial data safety data monitoring committees. It's important to note that these guidances do not contain specific language that directs industry sponsors how to perform safety monitoring activities. However, they do contain language that suggests the expectation that safety monitoring is being conducted. Each manufacturer can define their own core responsibilities related to safety monitoring tasks. However, the core concepts of safety monitoring guidelines are that they provide accurate, objective medical evaluation of events reported in connection with product usage, that they meet worldwide regulatory reporting requirements, that they gather and analyze full and complete information on safety experience with a product to guard patient safety. And this is an important emphasis. As we'll be discussing throughout this presentation, safety monitoring is not just processing AEs to satisfy regulatory requirements. The entire safety monitoring process is intended to guard patient safety. Next. To dig deeper into what product safety means, safety is actually the relative freedom from harmful effect to persons affected directly or indirectly by a product when prudently administered, taking into consideration the character of the product in relation to the condition of the recipient at the time. Prudently administered means following the approved dosage and indication. It also means acquiring, verifying, and reporting quality safety data that's crucial to obtaining market approval. Regulators, the public, and the medical community are scrutinizing the safety profiles of investigative products more closely than ever. A recent notable event that underscores the importance of robust safety data monitoring practices occurred when Vioxx was taken off the market in 2004. This drug had already been on the market for 5 years, used by over 20 million people for relief of osteoarthritis symptoms and pain, when its manufacturer reported that it doubled the risk of MI and CVA. In fact, there were already ample signals soon after marketing began for cardiovascular risks, actually in some people a 5-fold increase. Yet there was a delay in taking action on those early signals of a potential safety risk. In the post-Vioxx environment we're now in, there has been increasing public awareness of drug safety, and the FDA has scrutinized its processes with manufacturers to act more quickly when risks to public health and safety are identified. Next. What are some of the factors that can affect overall decisions regarding product safety? The severity of AEs compared to the disease intended to be treated. For example, the use of nausea-inducing chemotherapy to treat a life-threatening cancer. The number of patients who experience adverse effects. The efficacy of the treatment and availability of alternate treatments. Again, public pressure does play a role in decisions regarding product safety, as in the Vioxx example just given. Where does product safety monitoring begin? It begins with a review of an individual AE or SAE. Therefore, it is the summation of each investigator or user experience that ultimately determines the product safety profile. Each AE is a critical component of other comprehensive safety reviews by internal and external parties. Data mining, safety signal detection, and analysis of similar events are some examples of internal safety monitoring activities conducted by manufacturers. Examples of external parties that conduct safety monitoring activities are regulatory authorities, DSMB committees, and IRBs and ethics committees. Don't forget, the summation of adverse event information is widely disseminated. For example, to IRBs, published in the IB or IFU, and distributed to investigators and other users. This is why it is important that each AE undergoes a robust assessment by medically qualified personnel. How long should product safety be monitored? Safety monitoring is a continuous process throughout the entire life cycle of the product. It does not end at market approval. The point I'd like to make here is that it can be the tendency of the manufacturer to be laser focused on safety data during the pre-market approval period, leaving the post-market safety monitoring activities as an afterthought, a routine requirement, if you will. Safety monitoring must continue with the same rigor and follow-up during the post-market period and again throughout the entire product life cycle. Let's look at that more closely. During pre-market safety monitoring activities, the focus is to make initial decisions about safety and effectiveness of the product. During this process, you must take into consideration that the limited size and duration of clinical trials cannot detect or characterize events that occur at a low rate. For example, to have a 95% chance of detecting an AE with an incidence of 1 in 1,000, it requires approximately 3,000 subjects at risk for the event. Additionally, generalizability to the real-world population is limited due to the inclusion-exclusion criteria of a clinical trial. For example, it's common to exclude or limit patient populations such as the elderly, children, or pregnant or breastfeeding women. Exclusion criteria are designed to limit to limit interactions such as device-device, device-drug, or drug-drug, interactions with concomitant diseases or medications, and certainly off-label use is prohibited. In contrast to pre-market safety monitoring, post-market safety surveillance activities allow the manufacturer to begin to understand real-world safety data. In the post-market landscape, adverse events are looked at from a product point of view, not a clinical trial point of view. Accurate safety data is required to improve upon the initial understanding of the risk-benefit profile. The collection of systematic, scientifically valid long-term follow-up safety data is critical for evaluating and characterizing the product's evolving risk profile. And trending and signal detection activities to identify rare, latent, and long-term effects and actual rate of anticipated events are key activities of post-market safety surveillance. Typical post-market surveillance methods include spontaneous reporting of adverse events through established channels available to the public, physicians, patients, etc. Solicited reporting arising from post-market studies and registries, and adverse events found in medical literature and conference presentations, for example. Manufacturers must make informed decisions on risk minimization and disseminate safety information in a timely manner through actions such as issuing safety alerts, updates to the product IB or IFU, and even through product recalls, which may occur by the manufacturer's own initiative, FDA request, or FDA order under statutory authority. All right, that brings me to the close of my part of the presentation, during which we've spent some time describing the background and evolution of product safety monitoring practices. We reviewed key regulations and guidances from regulatory authorities and discussed manufacturers' responsibilities in product safety monitoring. In summary, the two key takeaways from this part of the presentation are: safety monitoring is a continuous process to be conducted throughout the entire product life cycle, and the essential building block of all safety monitoring activities begin with the individual AE review. Next, during the second part of the presentation, Kyoko will elaborate in more detail the key components of the individual AE review process. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. I will now expand further on the review of individual AEs. Next, please. Lori described earlier that one of the core components of safety monitoring is to meet the worldwide regulatory reporting requirements. In meeting the requirements, each event must be assessed for its potential reportability. For every AE, it is the seriousness, relationship, and expectedness of the event that determines the reportability in each country. The yes or unknown to all of the criteria will require expedited individual case reporting in most countries. I stress most, as some countries' requirements are more strict in that all SAEs must be reported in an expedited manner, regardless of relationship or expectedness. Typical items that require further follow-up with the reporter are for missing, incomplete, or conflicting data, and for general questions arising from the case level review that don't make medical sense. Another case in point for real-time review and cleanup of each event is that it ensures safety data readiness for compiling ad hoc, interim, and final study reports. I will speak more to ad hoc requests later in this session. Lastly, timely identification and processing of AEs for adjudication by the CEC, the Clinical Endpoints Committee, if your study has one, will be critical in staying within the study timelines for data cut and the subsequent analysis. First of all, serious adverse event or SAE is a subset of AEs. This is a yes or no determination and not a medical judgment by the reporter. For if a regulatory definition is met, a given AE meets the definition of an SAE if any one of these criteria is met. While the verbiage may differ among different countries, the components are universal and include fatal or life-threatening, meaning immediate life-threatening at the time of the event, not potentially life-threatening if prolonged or left untreated, or requires or prolongs inpatient hospitalization. And this does not include ER admissions, 23-hour stays, and outpatient treatment, or results in congenital anomaly, or results in persistent or significant disability, or requires medical or surgical intervention to prevent one of the above outcomes. And lastly, a significant event in the judgment of the medical professional. Next, please. The seriousness determination in the pre-market environment is made primarily by the investigator. The manufacturer may upgrade, but not unilaterally downgrade that determination. And if the discussion is needed to clarify, it should not be coercive. In the post-market environment, this is determined by the manufacturer. I do want to point out that seriousness is not the same as severity. While seriousness is a yes-no question, severity is a medical judgment by the reporter. The common categories used to define the degree of severity of the event may be something to the effect of mild, moderate, or severe. It is important to understand that while every AE has a level of severity, but not every AE is serious. Further, severe events are not necessarily serious. So as an example, the reporting event may be a bout of migraine, so severe and debilitating that it interfered with the patient's normal activities. But this does not make it a serious event unless any of the criteria that I discussed on the previous slides were met. The assessment of expectedness is also a yes-no determination. This refers to whether or not the event is listed as a side effect in your study documents, such as the IB, package insert, or instructions for use. Different terminology might be used depending on what regulations or guidances you might be looking at, such as the ICH using listed or unlisted, the FDA using expected or unexpected, and some countries' regulations refer to anticipated or unanticipated. But in all, the concept is the same. And the events are considered unexpected if they are greater in severity or more specific than what is listed in the above documents. A case and example is a reported event of migraine headache again, but if it was listed in your study document as a headache, then the migraine would be considered unexpected. And this determination is always made by the manufacturer. Assessment of a relationship goes into a blurry territory. First of all, relationship is not causality, which is a common interpretation by the reporters. The event only has to be associated with the use of the product, in that the patient must have used the product prior to the start of the AE, and that there is a temporal relationship, meaning that the event must occur within a reasonable period of time after the exposure. Having exposure and temporal relationship do not automatically mean that the product caused the event, but must be reported as related to the product. The commonly used categories for determining a relationship could be not related, any or all of definitely, probably, and or possibly related, and unknown. Next, please. The relationship determinations in the pre-market environment is primarily by the investigator. The manufacturer may upgrade, but not unilaterally downgrade without the discussion with the reporter. In the post-market environment, all spontaneously reported events, including those in the medical literature, are presumed to be considered related by the reporter. The event should be investigated further if either party believes that there is a relationship, such as a deep dive into reasonable temporal relationship, the new or concomitant disease and medications, and other same or similar occurrences in the study. And this should not be confused with relationship to the procedure in the case of device trials. So I'm going to switch gear now to talk about parties other than the manufacturer safety monitoring personnel that that may have adjunct or overlapping roles in reviewing individual events and or compiled data sets and or request ad hoc safety data. In doing so, I will also point out the potential implications and consequences that may result from their review. The FDA's mission is to protect the public health by assuring safety, efficacy, and security of drugs, biological products, and medical devices. They also have a concept of safety monitoring through the product life cycle, from the first human exposure all the way through its continued marketing life. Going back to Lori's example about the thalidomide, Dr. Francis Kelly, who was the FDA medical officer at the time of that tragedy, was applauded for not approving its marketed use in the U.S. based on inadequate evidence of safety. In 2017, there were 52 recalls and 33 medical device recalls by the manufacturer's own initiative, FDA request, or FDA order under statutory authority. The adverse events reporting system is not a static system, but is one that is evolving. For example, the FDA's Sentinel initiative that began in 2007. Ever since this launch, they have collected 1.7 million reports a year, 95% of which are received from the industry. As this information is used for data mining and identifying potential safety signals that might suggest a new problem that warrants further evaluation, the importance of submitting accurate and complete information for each event by each manufacturer cannot be overemphasized. The Data Safety Monitoring Board, DSMB, or the Data Monitoring Committee, DMC, are independent medical professionals with expertise in the therapeutic area who monitor blinded data for safety, effectiveness, and study conduct. Their main purpose is to protect the safety of the trial participants, credibility of the trial, and validity of trial results. The use of DSMB is not required, but it is recommended for controlled trial of any size that compares mortality rates or major morbidity. They operate under manual operations, which may include stopping rules such as if mortality rate in group A is greater than B with a statistical significance. They do have the authority to recommend, to modify, or even stop the study based on the review of the safety data. In the pharmaceutical space, there may be a cohort or dose escalation or safety review committee. They review safety data and tolerability to approve moving forward in the first-in-human trials with the dose escalation design. They review and discuss safety data and risk assessment, and this is, unlike a DSMB, a collaborative process that includes the investigators to share their own experience and patient events. The completeness and accuracy of safety data that the members review is critical for this decision-making process. And the safety data review plan may include stopping rules at either subject, cohort, and study level, leading to termination in the trial and even further development of the product. The Institutional Review Board, IRB, or the Ethics Committee, they have the role to protect the rights and welfare of human research subjects and ensure that the participants are exposed to minimal risks in relation to any benefits that might result from the study. Each institution will have different requirements for safety reporting that includes expedited SAE reporting, periodic reviews of AEs and SAEs at that site, or overall AEs and SAEs for the entire study, and they often request DSMB and DMC meeting results. Based on their review, the study participation can be halted or discontinued at the site level if unreasonable risk is identified. The Clinical Events Committee do not have a primary role to protect patient safety. However, they do have an important supportive role in regards to safety monitoring roles that the other parties hold. They provide medical review and adjudication of individual trial-specific endpoint events by study-specific definitions. If safety data are included as one of the study endpoints, the correct adjudication will be crucial for product approval and also safety risk analysis. And the DSMB or DMC plan, if you have one, may include decisions based on adjudicated data. And this ensures that the safety data that are reviewed are as accurate and free of bias as possible when the DSMB makes a decision. There may be other manufacturer-specific groups that provide safety oversight and may request to see ad hoc safety data sets, which may include the Chief Medical Officer or a Product Performance Evaluation Group, Medical or Science Affairs, a Steering or Executive Committee if your study has one, and the study chairman or the principal investigator, who at any point they have any concerns may request accurate data sets. So in summary, safety monitoring continues for the entire life cycle of the product. The pre-market AEs provides initial information on a highly selected population that is for short duration. The post-market AEs provides the data necessary to continue to characterize the product and collect rare, latent, long-term effects, and also the actual occurrence rates. There are many parties that evaluate safety data to fulfill their roles in that they ensure patient safety and minimize risk. And the decisions that are made at any point of the product life can have serious implications. Lastly, individual AEs are critical components of safety and benefit risk data evaluation. And so the importance of accurate assessment of each cannot be overstated.
Well, thank you both, Lori and Kyoko, for this valuable information regarding AEs. At this point, everyone's going to be unmuted, and we're going to begin our question and answer time. We'll do our best to answer all the questions within the designated time. However, there may be more questions that we have time for, and this webinar has been recorded, and you can access the entire presentation and questions at either Emanate Life Sciences or Criterion Web. in a location that it's going to be hard for us to hear, if you could please mute yourself. If you do ask a question by phone, please state your name and the company that you're with. It looks like there's some questions on our group chat, so I'm going to start with one of those questions. Let's see, there looks to be, the first one is from Jessica, and she's asking, how does a manufacturer conduct surveillance on safety information that gets published in literature? And Lori or Kyoko would want to answer that one.
Thank you very much, Carrie, and thanks, Jessica, for that question. I can take that. There should be a standard process within the manufacturer's post-market surveillance department that allows them to surveil literature, information published in literature. Well, someone's making I'm just going to say someone might need to mute. I hope everyone can hear me. On some sort of a regular ongoing basis. One method to do that, I think very efficiently, and one that we have participated with at Criterion Edge, is the use of the software, the web-based platform called Distiller. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. Distiller is a product made by, produced by Evidence Partners. And Distiller, we use it quite a bit. We use it almost exclusively in the support of the CER writing that we do. And Distiller is a great method to systematically review and appraise literature throughout a period of time using databases such as Embase and PubMed and so forth, and look at those that literature for any kind of safety events that might be published within that literature. So that would be one method of surveilling in the post-market period in clinical literature.
Okay, great. Our next question we have from Brad asks, what happens when the reporter and manufacturer can't come to an agreement about the relationship assessment?
This is Kyoko, and I can take that. But before I do, Lori, you were muted until you started to talk about Distiller. I wonder how much was missed and if everybody would want to hear.
Oh, I see. I don't know if folks heard, there was a great deal of background noise when I was first answering that question. So thanks, Kyoko. I was only saying at the beginning in my comments that each manufacturer should have a method or a process that they've identified within their own post-market surveillance departments that ensure the periodic surveillance of published literature for additional adverse events that might be reported in that literature. And every manufacturer can go about that differently. And that adds then, of course, those AEs that are reported in literature can add to the overall risk profile of the device or drug in the post-market environment. And I was saying that Distiller was a web-based platform made by Evidence Partners. That's been a great tool that we've used in our CER writing support that we do for our clients. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, for clarifying that. And Kyoko, do you like me to reread the question?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, this is from Brad, and he's asking, what happens when the reporter and the manufacturer can't come to an agreement about the relationship assessment?
If you absolutely cannot come to an agreement, then you have to take the worst assessment to make the judgment for reporting purposes.
Okay. Okay, and then I'm going to read another one on the chat bar. If you do have a question and you are unable to type in one, please unmute yourself and we will answer a question for you. The next question we have from Raj Bora, and they are asking what software systems are available and currently very popular in collecting and processing data related to AEs and SAEs.
I think that I might turf that over to Haj, if that's okay. I do not claim to be a systems expert.
Absolutely. So I think when we're talking about the collection of AEs, your most popular systems are still going to be your EDC systems, so your metadata rave, your Inform, your MedReals, your claim captures, and so forth. That's the starting point of actually collecting your AEs and SAEs. However, once you have those in-house, and especially when you're in a pre-marketed model, you'll have to have some type of in-house tools, and people use a variety of different tools at that point in terms of tracking the AE review and doing the determination for AE review, reportability, and then also in certain cases if it needs to go to CEC adjudication and managing that. To my knowledge, there isn't really a standalone system out there right now that does everything once you're trying to route, process an AE and SAEs. But one system you should look at is AG-MANTNet. They have an adjudication platform that when you're trying to do at least that component, that's something you could use.
Great, thank you, Haj, for that. And we'll go down to T. Ketter, and they're asking, how about adverse effects detected after loss of patent protection, excuse me.
Kyoko, do you have a thought on that?
I'm sorry, I'm not really understanding the question.
Okay, I'll read it again. It says, how about adverse effects detected after loss of patent protection?
If it's detected by the manufacturer, they do have the regulatory obligation to report. I'm not sure if that is the answer. I'm not sure about the loss of patent protection part.
Okay.
Sorry.
Well, I would say that if the drug or device, let's say drug in this case, by its original manufacturer, they lost their patent and there were generic drugs being marketed, the same drug being marketed as generic, but the manufacturer still continues to market their drug as they had prior to the patent. Would it not be true that their obligation to continue to report and surveil for AEs in the post-market, as long as they're selling that drug, continue? Would you agree with that, Kyoko?
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of the status of the patent on the drug itself, that's irrelevant. Would that be true?
Yes, it does come down
Yeah.
to whoever's manufacturing has reporting obligations if they come across the information.
Okay. A next question we have is from Stan, who says, I understand the EU was requiring manufacturers to perform post-market reviews on devices with CE mark. Has this process began, and is the U.S. considering something similar? This certainly seems to meet the need of capturing real-world data after the approval process. Not certain if this is relevant to today's discussion, but wanted to inquire. Is that something we would be able to answer?
Yeah, yes, Terry, I can take that briefly. I can take that question because that speaks certainly right to what Criterion Edge does every day, which is are involved in the clinical evaluation process for manufacturers with medical devices CE marked in Europe. And it is true that the EU is has rewritten regulations. They call the MDR regulations. They are aging in right now. They'll be in full effect in May of 2020. And part of those MDR regulations is the increased emphasis on post-market data collection and review, post-market review of safety and performance data on medical devices. That is a very large topic of conversation in the medical device world right now, and frankly, folks are scrambling to figure out how to make that happen without necessarily conducting registry studies or post-market clinical follow-up studies, which are lengthy, expensive, and that data takes a while to compile. So that process, so the question is, has this process began? Very much so. The process has began. Even it's just a process of figuring out how it's going to happen. The regulation hasn't gone into effect yet, but the process to figure it out has begun. And is the U.S. considering something similar? I'm sorry, I don't actually know if the U.S. is actively considering something similar per se. They probably are, but there is not, I don't hear a lot of chatter about that the U.S. has something in the pipeline that will match this post-market reviews of devices. And yes, the point that this is capturing the need of capturing real-world data is exactly what the MDR initiative regulation is intended to meet, is that there was a lack in clinical evaluations reports of what was happening to these devices in the real world in post-market clinical follow-up, besides what is just what is published in the literature. So now that is tightening, and the MDR is asking for additional information besides just published data found in literature. So thanks for asking that question.
Thank you, Lori. That's great. The next question is, how is the decision made to use or not use a CEC?
Kyoko?
Yes, this is largely dependent on the sponsor or the manufacturer. And I actually was going to discuss in more detail on the next webinar that is coming up that actually focuses on CEC adjudications. But the bottom line is that there is no regulatory requirement, but there are common components to each sponsor's decision making.
Okay, great. Do we have any other questions that anybody would like to put on our group chat or would like to unmute themselves and ask? Okay, well, at this time, we just want to say thank you for attending our webinar. Before you go, we'd like to make you aware that Emanate Life Sciences will be hosting 2 other events. I think Kyoko or Lori alluded to the follow-up webinar to this webinar that we'll be having in September. The topic will be who, what, when, where, and why for endpoint adjudication. And we'll be welcoming back our experts, Lori and Kyoko, so that will be in September. And then we will be having a live event in August. That will happen August 8th. Emanate will be hosting a networking presentation event on the topic of managing AEs in EDC. And this will be held on the East Bay of San Francisco at Viva Systems in Pleasanton, California. We will have 2 industry experts as well as free food and wine. So it'll be a great time to network with others in the industry. And you can register at these at www.emanatelifesciences.com. At this time, we'd just like to say thank you again for joining us. You will be receiving a survey and love to have your input on this webinar and any suggestions for future topics. So thank you once again, and we hope you all have a great day.